Western games are failing because the wrong people got into the room. That's the real reason. It's not about graphics, the budget, or even the gameplay. The problem is that too many Western studios started hiring people who don't even love games, don't respect gamers, and don't even seem to understand why these franchises became popular in the first place. Once those people take over the writing, the characters, tone, marketing, and eventually the studio culture itself, the game stops being made for players, it becomes a woke message with a gameplay loop attached to it. That is exactly what forced DEI has done to the Western games. Now, before someone instantly types, so you just hate diversity. No, that is not what I'm saying at all. A game doesn't suddenly become bad because it has a black character or a female lead or a gay character. Nobody cares if the character is actually well written. The problem starts when the ideology becomes more important than the game itself. When the first question isn't, is this fun? It's, does this represent the right people? When the writers are more interested in educating the audience than entertaining them. When every creative decision has to pass through a political filter before it even reaches the player. That's when games stop feeling like games, they start feeling like lectures. And once that mindset spreads through a studio, you just don't lose one good character, you lose the entire identity of the franchise. Because this didn't happen overnight. Western studios didn't suddenly forget how to make games. People inside those studios changed, and more importantly, the priorities changed with them. At some point, the goal stopped being make the best game possible and became make the safest game possible. The Western industry keeps pretending this made games better. Then when players say, no, this is actually exactly what we hate, they act confused. Because apparently building a 30-hour game around forced lectures about diversity was supposed to be some genius business plan. When it fails, they don't blame the writing or the director, they blame the gamers. Because apparently we are the problem. Apparently we're ignorant, or we're the reason why Western games keep losing players. It couldn't possibly be the fact that people bought a video game because they wanted to play a video game, not sit through a lecture every time they pick up the controller. Oh, and by the way, subscribe to the channel if you want. Or don't, but I've heard all the sexy people do subscribe. And apparently you get bonus sexy points if you like the video too, so do whatever you want with that information. Anyway, you notice it when the game starts feeling like it was written by somebody who is embarrassed by the world they're working on. A fantasy RPG doesn't feel like fantasy anymore, it feels like modern people wearing cosplay and using magic words. The setting says ancient kingdom, but the dialogue sounds like a workplace training video. That's the part that drives me insane, because I'm not asking every game to be edgy, I'm not asking every character to be some 2007 Xbox Live stereotype. I'm asking the people writing these games to respect the world they're building. If the game is supposed to be dark, let it be dark. Or if it's supposed to be brutal, don't sanitize every conversation until nobody sounds like they actually live there. If the characters are supposed to be cool, attractive, dangerous, flawed, whatever, let them be that. Stop dragging the entire game back into this safe, modern corporate tone where every character sounds like they know they're one bad line away from being screenshotted to Twitter or something. This is why I don't buy the excuse that it's all just bad luck, because we keep seeing the same thing happen. A studio starts talking less like a game studio and more like a social project. Suddenly every interview is about representation and inclusion and how important it is to do better. Then the game comes out and somehow the actual game part feels like it came second. The writing is flatter, the characters are safer, tone feels weirdly modern even when the setting isn't. When players point that out, the response is almost never, maybe we missed the mark. It's always this little smug attitude that the audience just don't get it. Like, we're supposed to be grateful that somebody turned a game franchise into a morality lesson. Maybe Western studios spent too much time listening to people online yelling that every game needed to represent them personally. Somehow the industry confused that noise for a demand, so we got games like Concord. Big surprise, nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted to spend their free time playing as a character who looks like they haven't exercised in 5 years and was designed by woke Twitter. That's the part these studios never seem to understand. Representation doesn't automatically make a character interesting. It doesn't make them cool, fun to play, or worth spending money on. Concord should have been the giant warning sign, and Sony shut it down in 2 weeks. 2 weeks! That is not just a flop. That is the gaming industry walking face first into a glass door and then pretending the door was problematic. That should have been a massive learning moment for Western studios. Maybe people don't want this, and maybe representation alone doesn't sell character because nobody wants to pay money for a hero shooter where half of the roster looks like they were designed to win an argument on Twitter instead of winning over players. But instead of learning from it, the industry acts like the audience failed the game. No, the game failed the audience. Honestly, I think Western studios are making this way harder than it has to be. If you have genuinely interesting character, most people couldn't care less what their ethnicity is or what gender they are or who they are attracted to. Make me like the character first, then tell me whatever you want about them. But don't walk into the room with a checklist before you even figured out whether the character is worth caring about. That's what it feels like now. Like someone comes up with a cool game, then somewhere along the development process it gets pushed through this giant corporate filter where everyone starts asking what the character represents instead of asking whether they're actually memorable or not. That is why it feels so forced, not because diversity exists, because the diversity becomes more important than the character. Then everybody acts surprised when the game flops, like, what exactly were you expecting? This is why so many of these games feel so boring now. Not just annoying, but boring. Because the second the studio starts making games for approval instead of players, the game loses its teeth. You can feel when a scene wanted to be sharper, but somebody softened it. It's like the whole game is constantly holding itself back. Not because players ask for that, because someone in the room was scared of wrong people getting mad, and at that point, that starts to feel insulting. If the game itself is afraid to commit to anything, why should I care? Why should I pay $70 for something that feels like it's apologizing for existing? I don't think games need to teach me how to be a better person. That's not why I play games. If I launch a game after a long day, I'm not looking for another company to tell me what I should think. I'm looking for a world that makes me forget the one I'm already living in. That's what games have always been so good at. They let you disappear for a while. You can be in some ruined kingdom or some cyberpunk city or a haunted village, and for a few hours, real life can actually just shut up. That is the magic of games. Then Western studios started dragging real-world politics into those worlds, and suddenly even the escape started sounding like the thing you were trying to escape from. That's the part I'll never understand. Who thought that was a good idea? Who looked at games, one of the best forms of escapism ever made, and thought, you know what this needs? Lectures. Because that's what it feels like now. You're not just playing through a story anymore. It starts to feel like the game is constantly leaning over your shoulder, making sure you notice it wants you to notice and agree with what's it trying to say. And maybe some people like that, fair enough. But a lot of us don't. A lot of us just want to play the damn game. So yeah, when people ask why Western games are failing, this is where I land. I don't think the audience randomly changed overnight. Also, I don't think gamers suddenly became too impossible to please. I think the industry started making games for a room full of people who care more about approval than entertainment, and then act shocked when normal players didn't clap. That's the part that makes this all so frustrating, because the fix is not complicated at all. People still love games. They just don't want every franchise to feel like it's been stripped of personality before it even gets to them. The longer Western studios pretend this is just about toxic gamers, the worse it's going to get. Players can tell when a game respects them. They can also tell when a game is looking down on them. That's the difference. When a game is made by people who actually love the medium, you feel it immediately. Even if it's messy or not perfect, there's a clear sense of purpose and confidence that makes it worth caring about. But when a game feels like it was made by people who are embarrassed by the audience, embarrassed by everything that made the franchise what it is, and embarrassed by the entire reason people like the franchise in the first place, then yeah, people are going to walk away, and they should. At some point, Western studios need to decide what they actually want. Do they want to make games for players, or do they want to make expensive interactive statements for people who praise them online but never buy the game? Because right now, too many of them are choosing the second one. That is why Western games are failing, not because diversity exists, because forced DEI became more important than making something people actually want to play. Subscribe and I love you. Bye!